everybody see that?
The Trump Towers?
Are they building one in Bucharest?
I'm going to light the match to what's going to be an explosive session.
Okay.
We're talking about Trump, technology, and what I like to call an era of no world order. Our panelists do not require any kind of an introduction. Mircea Geoana, Foreign Minister, Ambassador, President of the Aspen Institute. Liz Claman, who made Fox Business into a real business. Sam Burke, who is with CNN. We're going to talk a little bit the European views as they exist about Mr. Trump, the American views. Sam is going to talk a little bit about technology, how it's revolutionizing politics in terms of Facebook, other social medias, and I will shut up and get out of the way and enjoy this conversation enormously. Minister Geoana?
That was a
Explosive.
An explosive start indeed. As I mentioned this morning, almost none of the transitions from one system of world order to the next has been calm or peaceful. And we're in the midst of a similar major disruptive transformation of world order, political order, economic order, societal order, social compact order. And the main enforcer of the liberal order after the Second World War and after the fall of communism was the United States. And still is the United States. And of course, European allies. And also allies of the West from Japan or Australia or Korea, more recently India. This was the order that needs an enforcer. There's no global order without a malign or benevolent hegemon. Roman Empire, British Empire, name it. So what happens now in America is of grave concern to us, especially the staunch pro-American allies in Europe like Romania or Poland or the Baltic countries. The ones that being on the fracture line, frontier, periphery, name it. Romania is the most advanced frontier, eastern frontier of the West. And like the Jewish people, we have radars that anticipate danger. Because history has taught us to anticipate danger. We feel danger. So the question for us, is the new American administration, President Trump and his administration, willing, able, and capable to continue to maintain the liberal world order? That's the number one question, with all the strategic, economic, and political ramifications. Just one word, because there are much smarter people on this panel than I am, and I'm really, I've never had such a wonderful feeling to be surrounded by friends and superb professionals like yourselves. I do not believe, and this is my last part of my first comment, I don't think that we have Trumpism per se. I don't think President Trump incarnates an ideology in itself. I think he's more of a flag bearer of discontent of the public and somebody who innovates in public communication. I don't think he's the ideological leader of a movement. I think he's the one who took the flag in a moment when lots of the American public felt uncomfortable where the country was going. The second thing, I don't think President Trump is interested or willing to have Trumponomics, like we had Clintonomics and Reaganomics and Obamanomics. There's always a political, ideological dimension to a presidency and also an economic policy. And I think even the conversation now in the Congress about the tax reform not showing much of. But I think what President Trump does do is that he creates emulation in other countries And what I would call Trumpian politicians do appear all over the place, including in our part of Europe, including in the Visegrad countries, including there are also attempts in Romania. Lucky Romania, they're not that gifted and not that sexy and charismatic to become prominent political leaders. But the dissatisfaction, which is universal today in the public opinions, make President Trump a model for other politicians that are trying to use the discontent of the public to rise above the fray and become leaders in their own countries. So I don't think there is Trumpism. I don't think there's Trumponomics. I think they're Trumpian politicians. And I think this cloning of President Trump in many places around the planet will continue in the years to come.
Thank you.
What
Liz.
Mircea just said may have frightened some of you if there's a clone of Donald Trump. However, you are absolutely right on the level that we are seeing an echo of Donald Trump's form of populism. There's an expression in America when you're talking about the states and trends and lifestyle trends, and it says, as California goes, so goes the rest of the nation. So what you see in California first, with style and interest and taste, often then later translates into the states that were highly critical in the past. So as California goes, so goes the nation. In America as well, when you talk about politics, it's as Ohio goes, so goes the presidency. Ohio, over the past, billions of years since we've been electing presidents, has only gotten it wrong twice, meaning that whichever way Ohio went was the way the rest of the nation voted. Now, Ohio voted twice for President Obama, voted for President Clinton. Here's what they didn't do. They did not vote for Hillary Clinton, and therefore the entire nation appeared to swing. Why? Because what was going on in a great number of states that may not be as populous as California or New York was happening in Ohio. That was discontent after 8 years of people still struggling after the financial crisis. And then the Democrats made a very categorical error, really important error, and that was to just assume Ohio was going to go for the presidency. Donald Trump sensed that the regular guy and the regular gal out there were really unhappy, and he capitalized on that. That is something completely different than, oh, CNN got Donald Trump hired because they focus so much on him, or what I hear a lot is Fox got Donald Trump elected by only saying wonderful things about him, and you're the highest rated network, and of course I'm on the Business Channel, that's important to note. But Harlan, I would say that neither of those statements is true at all. CNN was damned if it did, damned if it didn't. I mean, they couldn't do anything without getting criticized. In the beginning, during the campaign, CNN covered every Donald Trump event. People started screaming, you're getting him elected, and then they got so criticized for that, they started to perhaps back off a little bit. Sam can talk more about that, but they got criticized for, oh, you're hitting him too hard. Fox, on the other hand, got hugely criticized by President Trump and the Republicans because of one debate where one anchor, you may know her name, Megyn Kelly, asked a question that Donald Trump didn't deny, and that was these misogynistic or obnoxious female comments, but he used that with his base in those states, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, the so-called now red states. Pennsylvania didn't used to be. And he got his base to suddenly say, Fox is ruining his chances on purpose. When you call for a boycott, especially of an entire network, that's a problem, not usually, but during a presidential election. And Fox, and I can tell you, I was inside the building. It wasn't, yay, it's going to be a Republican. It was, what are we going to do? There was extreme fear within inside the building. Are these Chatham House rules?
Yeah. We will make them Chatham House
Here
rules.
and there, just for this part. The rest of what I say is not a big deal. But there was such concern that Hillary Clinton was really not going to give Fox more than one interview, which she did to an anchor named Bret Baier. I think she also gave O'Reilly a little something here and there. But so we knew we were going to be shut out on the Democratic side, but we began to look and see that we were going to be shut out from the Republican candidate because Donald Trump stopped talking to Fox for a long time. Now, you can't be a legitimate network when neither of the presidential candidates will speak to you, will give you interviews. And it was not a moment where we all thought we're going to, Fox News thought we're going to get the president elected. For a long time, he shut us out and he called for a boycott of certain shows. He is still boycotting certain shows, anchors that he feels aren't fair to him. I may go down in history as the only network anchor to not ask Donald Trump for an interview. Why? There's no upside for me in that. I cover business. He is a businessman. If he came to me and said, yes, great, but there's so many people in front of me tripping over themselves to actually get interviews, and he's decided, I don't need anybody to decide whether I'm worthy. I know we're worthy at the Business Channel, so when we get the call, it'll happen. But to that point, the media's relationship is an obviously tenuous one. There's a lot of concern from NBC, Fox, because we have excellent reporters on the Fox News side covering President Trump. And when he stands there in front of thousands in an arena and starts ripping the media, there is a tension in that room. There's a tension in that arena. And all it would take is one flip of a comment, and that crowd could turn, and it could get ugly. And the best thing about our country, in my opinion, is the First Amendment, freedom of speech and freedom of the press. And when I say press, I don't mean you guys and then us. I mean all of us. You will never hear me say, oh, the mainstream media will never give Trump a break. No, we are all the media. And the media, a free press, is what will keep our nation safe. So people may look at Fox and say, oh, they all adore Donald Trump. I'm telling you right now, we stand for journalism. At least I do. And that's a really important note to make.
Thank you. Sam?
It's interesting, that word Trumpism, because what does it mean? A few years ago, a lot of people probably would have assumed that Donald Trump was a Democrat. Now he's a Republican, and he's had very, very varied views across the political spectrum. He was so strong against George Bush and the Iraq War at one point. He was so strong against Obama at many points. So it's very difficult to pin him. And if you listen carefully to what my colleague Liz Claman was saying just now, even at Fox News, the sister station where Liz works, they're saying, we don't know if we'll get an interview with the President of the United States, a channel that has so many commentators who are pro-Trump, who are conservative. Even they're nervous. And so that word, nervous, is something that I hear over and over again here in Romania, that I've heard with people who work alongside NATO in the United Kingdom, where I now live. And it's really interesting because I think if you look at the people who've had success with Donald Trump, you'd be surprised. During the election, Trump went after Carlos Slim, who's been the richest man in the world at times, certainly the richest man in Mexico. He went after Carlos Slim, who had made an investment in the New York Times. And then a few months later, they were walking out of Mar-a-Lago in Florida, best of friends. And I think what Carlos Slim proved is that if you can work with President Trump, this is a man who thrives on personal relationships. If you talk to the reporters, like Maggie Haberman of the New York Times, who also works at the CNN, she's been covering him for years. They have a great personal relationship. So on the same day that he's blasting the mainstream media, he might call up Maggie Haberman and have a chat with her. If you look at Theresa May, who many people in the European Union and the United Kingdom are frustrated with, she very quickly knew if she could forge a personal relationship with him, it would be to her and hopefully the UK's benefit. So many people have been able to see past and see he's not a Democrat anymore. He may not always be a Republican. So I think if we look at these key influencers and see there are real opportunities, whether you're Carlos Slim, whether you're Theresa May, whether you're Romania or NATO, if you can build those personal relationships with Trump, it might trump everything else that you've heard about him in the media.
Thank you.
Perfect example of that, by the way, is President Obama. Trump couldn't have ripped Obama more, but 5 minutes sitting there with him when they first met.
Literally 5 minutes.
5 minutes. He turns and says, "This is a good man. This is a good man." Again, then later he rips him again. So what are we supposed to believe? I mean,
But they weren't
it's like a
talking-
tennis match.
But no, your point is so valid because when they were talking to each other and had a relationship, even if it were just a few days as they were switching places in the house, all of a sudden it was there. When they're not talking to each other anymore, then he's ripping him again. But I think that should give hope to a lot of people who are nervous that if you can work to forge that relationship with him. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, said it's so much easier to get a hold of Donald Trump than Barack Obama. You used to have to go through this whole bureaucratic rigmarole and figure out what would be discussed, what time would it be discussed, who would say what. Now he just calls up and says, "Hey, can I talk to Donald?" And he's on the phone in a few minutes. So for whatever nervousness that people may legitimately have, let that give hope that hopefully if you work right, and that is diplomacy. He's very untraditional when it comes to diplomacy, but diplomacy is personal relationships. That gives a real opportunity for a lot of people.
Before I turn to the audience, in many ways what you have just said, three of you, is really frightening to me. You've scared me. Mircea talks about the lack of leadership in an uncertain world. Where is America going? And nobody knows. Both you, Liz, and you, Sam, talk about a president who's rather like a butterfly, who turns at a moment's notice one way or the other, and it's unpredictable. So how do we deal with somebody who's so temperamental, who can change in an instant, where reliability and some degree of certainty are needed, and where in some cases personal relationships are never going to be sufficient because nations have interests? And you may have very, very close personal relationships between and among leaders, but it will not make any difference when there is a collision. So how do we deal with that? Mircea, what do you think?
No, I think President Trump, as a former politician myself, and I hope he received well our president. I hope he will not change his mind that after 5 minutes. I think he has he's an instinctual politician. I think he feels the public. And I think his long career in the public and showbiz, I think he has a fantastic talent to make use, politically speaking, of the immense polarization and the echo chambers that public discontent and social media do create. We are not living in societies that can find easily consensus on almost anything. So I think he has a fantastic instinct in operating, also bypassing mainstream media, communicating directly with the people, and making use of this echo chamber of a polarized society. My concern, as somebody who really knows how decisive is the transatlantic anchor to my nation, is that I'm afraid, and as a friend of America, I'm afraid that we start seeing the beginning of the end of the middle-class America and the American dream, the melting pot magic of America. And my concern is that in a world where any global superpower needs the same ingredients, economic might, money, technology, military muscle, but also cultural, soft power, attractiveness. And in a way, the more you go into echo chamber and surf on this polarized society, and you do well politically for the short term, the faster the disintegration of what keeps America together, the glue, the American dream, the middle class, would continue to. And the question is, who's gonna use this vacuum? Because nature and politics abhor a vacuum. And today there is nobody in the world, ready to take over the baton. So this period of uncertainty, I think, could be very dangerous for the world. And as much as personal relationships do matter, I think that in the end, we'll need the whole administration, not only the president, to understand that America has an obligation to lead. There is an obligation to lead, and it's an obligation to keep your side of the contract, as little Romania keeps our side of the contract. And we are staunch allies, and we do our part. We expect also our greatest ally and our number one strategic partner to keep your side of the bargain. This is exceptionally important, because in the end, world order is also a contract. It's not just human connections between political leaders.
Excellent. Liz?
I would only say that it's really, really hard to follow some of the things that Donald Trump has said and then what he does. During the campaign, he talked immediately about forcing China to unleash its currency and stop manipulating its currency. He couldn't have been clearer about that. After one meeting, going back to these relationships one-on-one, one meeting with Xi Jinping.
And one chocolate pie.
Oh yeah, the chocolate pie.
The best you've ever had. Don't tell me the best I've ever had. There's
Also
some
in
really
Florida.
good ones in New York. And he said that, oh, Xi Jinping's great and China is not a manipulator of its currency. Okay, what about now we say we're going to blow off NATO? He's been dealing with Justin Trudeau. They're wavering a little bit. He's kind of making I can come up with 15 examples of saying one thing and completely doing something other. However, when you talk about the void and the vacuum, we had brought up G0, where no one country, no one bloc actually has control, like the G20 or the G10s, G7. We're losing that to China if we work on trade the way it appears we are going to. We're already out of the TTP, and that's a shame, because there are so many countries that would love to do business. But when you talk about immigration, that's when all of us should sit up straight. I just had on my show a CEO and a founder of a company that was celebrating her 20th anniversary of having come to this country with nothing, not speaking English, no money. And where was she coming from? Romania. Her name is Anastasia Soar. If you come to America, actually she's in 50 countries. She is the eyebrow wax beauty queen of the world. Oprah, Michelle Obama, Jennifer Lopez, everybody uses her. She now, with her company, employs 300 Americans. That may seem small, but small business is the backbone of the United States. And Anastasia, had she been barred at the border, because she was, quite frankly, a refugee. She filed for political asylum because of the Ceausescu regime, which would not let anybody have their own businesses. She said, had she been stopped at the border, 300 people in America would suddenly have no job. And I think that that's extraordinarily important to look at. So we're still waiting to see which, as we say in America, which way does the wind blow on any given day with President Trump? But there have been some things that a lot of people agree with that he's done really well, and that is give people optimism in the sense that it's going to be a friendlier atmosphere than 8 years of the Obama administration to business and entrepreneurs. That's gold in our world.
And just to pick
Sam.
up, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and when you go into a contract with somebody, you think that they're going to honor it, whoever comes next will honor it. That's part of the continuity of the United States. But here is a president who's talking about some of the most important deals, like NATO, like NAFTA, and saying he's willing to let it go when it comes to NAFTA. And so however much you say, I mean, we don't know yet if those big things really he is willing to just throw it out the window. But I think you have to expect the unexpected. You know, NAFTA, maybe it could come, maybe it could fall apart, maybe it can be renegotiated, maybe it will just stay as it is, but you've never even had somebody even throw out these type of ideas, and he did throw out TPP after Hillary Clinton had already thrown it out, essentially. So people do need to expect the unexpected because he's already done it on so many issues. The way that he communicates with people, the way that he communicates through Twitter is completely different, and he's used it to his advantage, and he's winning doing it. So however scary that may be, you do have to consider those possibilities at the very least.
And make no mistake, North Korea is a very important and fearsome situation at the moment. You're dealing with Kim Jong-un, who is insane. And you could get really furious with Donald Trump when he tweets out there's going to be fire and fury if Kim Jong-un does anything, where even sending a missile would go to Guam nearby, which is a US territory in the ocean. What we've been doing, president after president after president, has done very little, if anything, to stop North Korea's missile program. So my dad, as a surgeon, used to say, when you're treating the patient with the same medicine over and over again and the patient's not getting better, change the medication. And what Donald Trump is doing may be freaking people out, but at some point we have to change the medication. We have to try something different. It makes me extremely nervous the way he's doing it, but he's smart to at least try something different to see if that works.
And that is what's relatable. When you were talking about him being able to reach mainstream Americans, I think people on both sides of the political spectrum can agree with what you just said. What the United States has been doing with North Korea, you could argue whether it's working or not, because, I mean, things, people aren't dying in Japan and South Korea right now, but clearly it hasn't deterred North Korea from getting those weapons.
And
so
we're
that
talking
type of thing, it does, you're
Republican
right,
presidents, Democratic presidents. I mean, you're talking going back 8 different presidencies. Nothing has stopped them from starving their own people, killing their own people, and developing their nuclear program.
I'm going to turn to the audience, but I just want to put in a point here. Kim Jong-un is many things. He needs a new barber and a new tailor, and the reason he dresses and looks that way, which nobody in America knows, is because he wants to be like his grandfather. This is done for eternal purposes. He is not insane. If you know the Koreans well, he's acting very predictably, and quite frankly, had the Bush administration not canceled the deal to ship oil and other energy, then I don't think Korea would have been at the same position it is. And so the Bush administration, in addition to doing what they did in Iraq, deserves tremendous criticism for what they did in North Korea. And it's something that people need to look at. But if you treat this guy as being crazy, you're making a huge mistake, because the advantage he has, in my mind, is that he can escalate more quickly than we can. And unless you're going to go to war, which would be unbelievably stupid, as Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis said, because the results would be catastrophic in North and South, no matter who wins. There are other ways. And what I find really troubling, I think you need to open up some form of communications, which Rick Tillerson said the other day he did. And then the president comes out and cuts the legs under the Secretary of State by saying, I love Rex, but it's not worth it. That's no way to conduct diplomacy.
Although it's interesting, some people in the Trump administration have been telling CNN that he was doing that, President Trump was doing that, just to lower pressure and expectations on Tillerson in his discussions with North Korea. Now, whether that's spin or not is up to you guys to decide, but it is interesting that they're having those, that there is some type of channel of communication open.
I will make a wild prediction. Write this down. By the year's end, the next Secretary of State is going to be Nikki Haley, and if Trump survives for a second term, she's going to be on the bottom of the ticket. We'll see. Questions? Please. Brief. Identify yourself again. Question.
To hear my name again, Muzaffer Şener from Şehir University, Turkey. Actually, my question is about, do you think that the Russia first policy will turn back with Trump, especially not with Trump, with Obama, which is starting from leading behind?
Maybe with Bob Mueller,
Sorry?
the special counsel.
I mean that my question is how they see that as the anchor coming from a new actor in the foreign policy as a media. CNN and the Fox is very much important about to creating the news, and also their broadcast has great influence on the minds and the hearts of the people. Therefore, I want to hear their voices, how they see, and they made the many interviews or let's say many news, and their personal, let's say, to intervention or comments about the issue, about the Trumpism, which has started not because of the
Your
Trump.
question is really about the role of Russia, is that right?
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
I want to pick up the first part, and then I'll quickly hand off to Liz to focus on the broadcast part. But every president, the last 3 presidents, have all started off the same way with Russia, in a sense. Bush said, I looked into Putin's eyes and I saw his soul. Obama talked about the famous reset. Trump echoed that Obama-ism of wanting to start things over. So in some ways, they're all doing the same thing. They've all started out wanting to do something different with Putin, and at least 2 out of the past 3 have quickly ended up somewhere else. And it's looking like it could be that way with Trump. So in some ways, at least at this point in an administration, in the first year, we're at exactly the same place that we had been before, in some ways.
You've heard the expression, his bark is worse than his bite. Putin is who I'm talking about. Putin's bark going on and on, ex-Crimea, because they basically stole Crimea. That's the impression, even though we know that there are a lot of people in Crimea who had originally wanted to go back to Russia. That, Putin and Russia's economy is the size of Italy, okay? Wrap your mind around that. This gigantic country with 11 time zones has a tiny economy, mostly based on oil, and the price of oil has gone down markedly, and that has definitely hurt them. So how would they be able to give so much money or pay or have this economic strength? They just don't. And it's amazing to see how much power they can have by working, hacking, and involving themselves and trying to throw our election in the United States, which has absolutely been confirmed by top officials.
Or not even hacking it. In the sense that maybe they were just buying ads.
Right. And
definitely hacking
exactly,
and
yes.
not even
the
hacking
Facebook
it.
story where they bought ads and they were just allowed to promote things that definitely worked against one candidate or another. But Donald Trump, as he looks at Russia, has been, and I am just calling it as I see it, habitually disinclined to say a single bad word about Vladimir Putin. Now, of course, they did kick out a bunch of diplomats recently. The United States did. But there has been no screaming out about how bad this is. He spends more time attacking the United States free press, which makes us most unique in the democratic world, than he does human rights violations in Russia. All of the journalists been murdered in Russia. Any opponent somehow ends up floating or poisoned in Russia.
And attacking Germany for their lack of payments, as he sees it.
And the mayor of San Juan?
The mayor of San Juan, had you asked President
and
Trump
NFL.
outright, and I don't know if anybody did, he would have said for France, Marine Le Pen. I understand what she's saying. I understand her heart. Not only did Emmanuel Macron win, he won by a wide margin. People in the world know what's right for their country. And the way our system works, people felt we had to give some different chance. And Donald Trump, not just for the less wealthy in the red states, in Ohio and, Oklahoma and all that, and Texas, but wealthy people too, looked at this and said, maybe we ought to give a businessman a try. We have tiny growth. We have growth at the moment for the current, I guess, the most recent reading of Q3, 1.4%. Well, inflation very low. GDP is maybe 2 to 2.2. I mean, you here in Romania, 4.8. I know it's a different economy and much smaller scale, but
We would kill for those numbers in the States.
we really would. And yet,
And we might.
And yet, what are you going to do? I mean, you have these people
Can
who
I jump
say,
in?
this is
Please,
good.
Joe. Please,
Because we talked and we tried to put the pieces of this world disorder in some logical frame. And of course, personalities matter in history. And with a twist of a coincidence of events, history can go in a totally different direction. There's no predictability of history. What I'm trying to say, speaking about Russia and also about China, that I think the original hypothesis at the end of the Cold War and the strong belief in the American establishment and the belief in Europe was that both Russia and China and other nations would embrace the liberal world order. Not necessarily become democracies, not for the Chinese leadership to give up power that much, but to embrace the rule of the game. And being part of the game, they will have a stake in keeping the system working. I think this assumption failed. And I think these two big countries and others, also big countries, they understand that they could either change the name of the game to their own benefit or be disruptive of the game as they see fit. And here where Russia and China part. Russia plays the spoiler game, and they have enough resources, even with a limited economy, with a small economy by the size of the country. They still have enough resources and sophistication and intelligence in both sense of the term to be a spoiler and a disruptor, while China plays the other game. For me, to see the president of China being the hero of Davos and the one filling the void, and no one from the new administration going to Davos, not because Davos or World Economic Forum is the place where people should be. I'm not saying that.
Oh, there's a big question as to whether Donald Trump will be going to the World Economic Forum in Davos next year.
That's a big
He
question.
may blow it off.
So I think that these countries understand that there is a shift in global order, and each of them, authoritarian regimes and top-down control regimes, are trying basically to steal the show. And I think this is a time where inevitable confrontation is on the horizon.
Yeah. Radu, you had a question? Another anchor to beat that metaphor to death.
Thank you, Harlan. It's an excellent panel.
Announce yourself, because some people may not know who you are.
Radu Tudor, I'm a journalist, defense editor for Antena 3 Romania. I want to ask a question, but please don't consider one a funny one. Is the US committed to Washington Treaty? Is the Trump administration in the United States ready to respect and to engage the Article 5? Because I want to hit the target right now and hear your excellent opinion about this. Mircea Geoana says something about a radar that we have. Yes, we all have it. And this radar tells us that we have to ask time and time again, since Trump was elected, will the Trump administration and the US will be fully committed to respect the Washington Treaty, and especially the Article 5? Thank you.
I will say Article 5 has been a big topic of discussion, which, as I understand it, it's if one nation is attacked, as one member nation of NATO is attacked, we all stand together. Well, we just were really surprised at what happened in Ukraine, where nobody rushed to their defense. This is extraordinarily important, where, you know, Turkey is a member of NATO. Turkey stands as a NATO member and is very serious about it. I would have to believe, as long as General James Mattis is in place, we will stay with Article 5. We will abide by it. You know, Trump really, his big issue was, why is the United States paying way more than its fair share, and nobody's holding up to some of the rules of NATO? You know, when he made a big deal of that, Canada, within a blink of an eye, started investing more in their military. And that's all President Trump wanted. Fairness when it came to paying your dues and paying what you're supposed to pay for NATO. And that's really important. A certain percentage of your GDP must go to your military, and it can't just be the United States. But again, that actually works as a double-edged sword, because are we relinquishing our leadership position by being that nation that adds that much? But I hope that the United States sticks with Article 5, and I know General James Mattis, Secretary of Defense, believes we absolutely should.
I'll just echo what Liz said basically and say that so many people that I have spoken to who might be ardent opponents of Donald Trump, who have met with Mattis, walk out and say, thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God, I have faith in the world, I have faith in security, I have faith that things will be all right. I mean, so many people that I respect, that I have in the highest regard, have walked out and just said, great, including liberals who have met with him. And then I think that even Donald Trump doesn't know a lot of the answers to those questions because he sees things just for the money. Again, just echoing what you said, for him, he's a businessman, so it's no surprise that he looks at things and he looks at money. And I think one of the most important things that I've heard somebody close to him say is that what's most important to Donald Trump isn't winning necessarily, it's the appearance of a win. So just if people do what Canada did and give the appearance of helping him, it could be fine. The rest of the day could just be a normal day.
Yeah, and to the end of being this businessman, when he became president, he wanted to see the specs of Air Force One. And he looked at it, this is what he does best, he looked at it, immediately line itemed a bunch of things and said, what the hell is this? We don't need this. This costs too much money. You know, he knew that you needed the radar skin of this plane because he's the leader of the free world, but
that's probably what every CEO does that you interview. I mean, that's probably what Dara Khosrowshahi, the new CEO of Uber, he probably looked at the specs of a lot of things.
Yeah, you
maybe
look
in a
at
different
details.
way, but
it's kind of dumb, but General Electric, which is a global company, they switched CEOs because it's just not getting up to the growth that they would like to see. And the new CEO went and started looking, and the first thing he did was ground the private jet fleet that top executives were using and said, you guys have to fly commercial now. But that's what smart businessmen do. Others say, oh, let's buy a foosball table, let's buy toys and free granola bars for everybody, you know. But others, and Donald Trump, looks at certain things and says, no, you're charging me this much for a bridge. Why are you charging me this much to build a bridge, only in a different state? No, you come down to his price. You know, and that's, I believe, very much what was at heart there.
Mircea, you want to talk about Article 5?
Yeah, I would like to talk about, Article 5 is a derivative of a broader contract. I think President Trump comes, and I think he will evolve with the job. There's no human being that is not influenced by the environment he or she live in. So he's still at the beginning of his administration. What I'm trying to say, he had, and probably still has, a fundamental and gutsy distrust of multilateral institutions. He's a negotiator. He goes to you, and strikes a deal. And he can extract a better deal out of the conversation on a bilateral basis in this room. If he would be here, he will negotiate with Richard Stantar for BNP, and with Dragoș Andrei from EBRD, and each of you, and Radu Tudor from Antenna 3, and even the match breaker here, and he will try to get the best possible deal. So he doesn't trust. I think that during the campaign, something that was really worrisome to us, even more than his remarks about NATO, was his remarks about the European Union. In a way, he felt like being happy that the Brits are leaving, which of course is a bad news for Europe. Britain leaving European Union is bad news for everybody.
And by the way, he criticized President Obama for expressing his opinion, which was that Brexit should stay. So suddenly it's okay for him to express his opinion on this, and people are confused by that hypocrisy.
NAFTA,
TPP.
TPP, TTIP. I think that the longer he will stay in office, for the first term, eventually another one, that's for the American people to decide, he will understand and start to cherish the value of having allies as a bloc. Having Europe as an ally is not only good for Romania or for France or for Germany, for Luxembourg, or for Norway, non-EU, NATO, staunch ally. This is good for America too.
But then Europe better step up and look at what Liz said about Marine Le Pen, and I imagine that her assumption is correct, that Trump probably was a supporter, and just like that with Macron.
Best friends.
Best friends, invite him over to see the parade and everything.
And even he wants to have a Bastille parade in Washington.
Yes.
He loves it so much in Paris.
Yes.
So
On Champs-Élysées, he wants to do something in Washington.
I hear your anxiety, and I understand your anxiety, but then we better hope, those of us who live in Europe, that Macron and Theresa May, again, that people keep on greasing those wheels of that relationship.
Except that Trump, as a president and as a candidate, sparked what really has become a rise in populism that many countries who have been there before, they've seen that movie, it's not a good ending. And I think that may be the two-sided issue here.
We have time for 2 more questions. The good news is that Russia is not going to invade NATO ever. Ever. So therefore, don't worry about Article 5. And if there were a situation, I agree with the notion that the majority of the staff supporting Mr. Trump, H.R. McMaster, Jim Mattis, Rex Tillerson, would want Article 5. I have no certainty that Donald Trump under the gun would follow it, but it's not going to be an issue. We have time for 2 more questions. There was a question here and a question over there.
Sides because that's...
Thank you. My name is Doro Costa. I'm a former diplomat. I was an ambassador to China lately. May I have a very small comment? That is, if the president now is not so fond of multilateralism, then one may say that we do have a big problem because the global disorder, as you very nicely put it, is still hugely interdependent. And it is hardly possible to deal with 120 members of the WTO separately to negotiate trade deals. But this is his cup of tea. The key word in my question is unpredictability. And there are 2 sides here. One, whether the most relevant and consequential conflict that is going on now in the United States is between the president and his party, not the other party. Is this true or false? 2, how would, whichever way, how would this impact on the second mandate? And the common anecdote goes that one mandate is no mandate.
Yeah.
So, what can we expect from that?
Let's have this other question here too, please.
Yes. Hello, yeah. I'm Richard Sankar from BNP Paribas. I have first a statement and a question. I think what we call populism also is the result in the countries where we had big elections, including the United States, France, the Brexit, and probably other countries, of the fact that there are multi-speed development in the countries, discrepancies, and part of the population feel out of the game. And most of the support of those who were elected basically come from there. And the first round in France with President Macron highlighted that. Marine Le Pen didn't make the most votes in the big cities where you have a diverse population. My question is about the Trump administration and staff. What impact and influence do they have on President Trump himself? Do they feel comfortable in their role in assisting and helping the president? Do they feel lost in translation? Well, how do you analyze it for now and the support they can bring to the president?
Two questions. Civil war in the Republican Party and the administration around Trump. Why don't we start Sam and then Liz and then...
Because I cover technology for CNN, I just want to say that one of the reasons that there's this unpredictability, which I've now seen in the US where I'm from, in the UK where I live, is because so much of predictability is based on polling that's done via landlines. That was already disrupted when people got cell phones, and then again now that people have social media. And I think one of the reasons that things have become so unpredictable is because it's so hard to measure what's real on social media and what's fake on social media. And even if we could distinguish between what's real and what's fake, it's very hard to actually quantify or measure what's on social media. And so many people don't answer their landlines, don't answer cell phone calls to try and get their opinion. And I think that's one reason that Brexit, which won by a pretty good margin, it wasn't, we knew by the end of the night what had happened, but people didn't see it coming because people are stuck on some of the old platforms and not looking at the new platforms. And then just to answer that question, from what we know at CNN, from the people that we have who are at the White House, that many people feel that sometimes they are not able to influence the president, which isn't to say all of the time, but sometimes there is a frustration. And then sometimes we've even had people report on CNN that they say that they're staying there for the sake of the country, that they don't agree with a lot of what Trump is doing, but they feel that the nation might be worse off. When people say, how can you stay if you don't support this? They say, I think the nation would be worse off if I weren't there. I'm trying to be a moderating force.
Liz?
There's a television show on the Animal Planet network, which follows things like sharks and all of that. And it's called When Animals Attack. What we're seeing now is when Republicans attack, and not others, each other. And it is stunning for most Americans, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, that the Republicans control the government right now. They control the House, they have a majority in the Senate, and they have the presidency.
And governorships, and state legislatures.
And they can't get it done. They can't get health care done. I'll be amazed to see if they can get tax reform done, although Warren Buffett, who looks at all of these things he makes bets all the time in his insurance world, and he said, I'm going to take the other side. We will see tax reform, because that's, Republicans, we want tax change, we want tax reform. He said, we'll see it before the end of the year, but it'll probably be more like a tax cut and no real reform. But yes, there is, make no mistake, civil war might be a little over-dramatized, but it is not a happy time in Republican land. You have Republicans who are what everybody thinks was the DNA previously from Donald Trump, and that was fiscal conservatives. We've got to get the debt down. Democrats spend too much. We have an unbelievable amount of debt and a huge deficit. Get us in government, we'll fix it. If you look at the tax reform plan and you look at the budget that's been promoted, it balloons it over 10 years. Because they have no way of getting together on what would bring in the revenue, what spending cuts, what other kinds of forms of taxes. And that is very evident, I think, and tells everybody that there is civil war when you have the conservatives run by what we call the Freedom Caucus. They want to see no deficits
In the House of
anymore.
Representatives to distinguish with the Senate.
Absolutely, House Republicans are there too. And then you have the Republicans who believe in something called dynamic scoring, which is they're trying to anticipate how people will behave, react, and spend when they cut taxes. I am here to tell you, you can't anticipate or forecast that. George Bush cut taxes and people did not spend the money they got, they saved it or paid down debt because it was after the financial crisis. Listen, they may very well be right, but that's like trying to figure out how many calories are in a slice of pie in the sky. Nice try, you can't do it. And that's why you have civil war right now. It's one thing to have, you've heard of family infighting. Well, I mean, you may all come from the same parents, but boy, Sisters and brothers hate each other sometimes.
And you might be better off to understand what's happening in the Republican Party with the president and look at the Chinese food that he's enjoying with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. I think that might say much more about the state of play when the president's having Chinese food at the White House with the two Democrat leaders.
Mircea, you want to make a farewell comment?
Yeah, a farewell comment. I mentioned earlier the immense role of leaders and personalities in history. I would like to end saying that also there is another component to history making, which are the real structural trends. That things that do create a context for a leader to take history one or a direction or the other. And what I'm seeing is no response, neither from America nor from Europe, on the structural trends that produce the dissatisfaction of our public opinions. The redistribution of economic gain, polarization of societies continues to be there, and I see no sign, not the tax reform, not in Europe, a beginning of a remedy to the source of discontent. I don't see a credible answer to the second major trend, which is the pace and disruptiveness, Sam, of technological change influencing physical, digital, and biological dimensions of human societies. And thirdly, something which is always in us, will never change. From the Stone Age to when we'll leave this planet to go to colonize another planet, probably relatively soon, is that the moment when I see my youngsters and the future generations not dreaming credibly about a better life, at that moment, political establishments running the show today, they are in dire straits. These three trends are there to stay. And my concern as a free citizen this time is that I don't see enough credible solutions from the top leadership of the West to the issues that are here to produce dissatisfaction, disruption, and eventually world disorder. And here, who knows? Maybe President Trump, with his instincts and the way he will mature with the job, will be able, and other leaders in Europe, other leaders around the world, some of them represented in this very hall, might have an answer. But I'm really concerned that the trends will continue to produce dissatisfaction, thus more populism, thus more fragmentation, thus more centrifugal forces all over the world.
Well, let me just end on what I think is optimistic here, because everybody's nervous and saying what's horrible in this. We recently celebrated the Jewish New Year, and I asked my 13-year-old son and my 16-year-old daughter, what do you hope for the better, not just of yourself, but for the world, and what should we do that is different from what we're doing now? And my son said, I know everybody seems to be beating up on the president and they don't like him, and he has done things that are fair enough that people shouldn't like him, but I think we need to give him a chance. And I think what Mircea just said is true, that perhaps he will learn. It's early in the stage of this, and hopefully he will get better at some of the things that we need him to, and that the rest of the world, including emerging Europe, need him to.
Before I thank the panel, I'd like to leave you with 3 statistics to consider very, very strongly, which I think summarize anecdotally. First, if you poll a majority of Republicans in the Senate, they want anybody but Trump to be president, but they will not say so publicly, and that is strongly felt. Second, the statistic which reinforces much of what Mircea said, in 1964, before the Gulf of Tonkin incident brought the Americans into Vietnam, 75% of Americans trusted the government. Today, not only do 75% of Americans not trust the government, but 75% of Americans believe that the future will be more bleak for their children and their grandchildren. We've never seen that before. And finally, when we think about China, right now in America, less than $200 billion is conducted of business on the internet. In China, over 60% of their GDP, $9 trillion, is conducted on cell phones. That tells you something. With those points in mind, please join me in thanking this panel. This has been a sensational afternoon. Thank you very much.